is a high-mobility, multi-purpose vehicle commonly referred to as the Humvee. Like its name, it has a lot of uses, and when it's down, it has to be repaired. This particular vehicle has been sent in for repair because the engine is running rough. Caution: before starting the vehicle, make sure that the work area is well ventilated. Exhaust gases can kill. Note: do not attempt to start the engine until the wait to start lamp goes out. When you first start the engine, check the features. Check car, the air restrictor indicator, engine oil pressure, fuel level, coolant temperature, and battery charging indicator. There could be a problem somewhere in the fuel system. For the next few minutes, let's go through the procedures required to troubleshoot the fuel system on the Humvee. Always use troubleshooting procedures as outlined in the appropriate technical manual. As with all mechanical repair, check the easy things first. Remove the fuel tank filler cap. If you hear a hissing sound or a popping sound when the cap is removed, or the cap will not remove at all, the fuel tank vent may be at fault. The mechanic and helper open the hood. The fuel tank vent is located on the firewall behind the surge tank. To check the breather, remove the vent hose from the breather and start the engine. If the engine runs smooth, replace the breather. If not, place the hose back on the breather. Next, we'll be checking for leaks, crimps, or restrictions in the fuel lines. These are the lines which run from the fuel storage tank to the engine fuel pump. Ensure that they are not broken or damaged. These lines appear to be in good condition. If the lines appear defective, they must be repaired or replaced. Even though the air restrictor indicator was in the green, let's look at the air filter located in the air cleaner and see if it is dirty, clogged, or damaged. The air cleaner assembly is located on the right front of the engine. Remove the bolt securing the ring clamp to the air cleaner assembly. Remove the ring clamp and cover. Check the gasket on the air filter housing cover. If the gasket is defective, replace it. Remove the nut and washer which hold the filter element in place. Then carefully pull the filter element from the air cleaner assembly. Check the filter element for tears and rips. If it is ripped, the filter element must be replaced. Also check the seal on the filter element. If the seal is defective, replace the filter element. Dust or dirt can be removed from the filter element by turning and gently tapping it around the edge. Reinstall the filter element. And start the vehicle. Not much improvement here. A rough-running engine may be caused by water or gasoline in the fuel system. Let's check for fuel contamination at the fuel-water separator. The helper stops the engine. The fuel-water separator is located on the left side of the engine next to the cowl. The fuel-water separator is connected to the engine fuel system by two hoses. Outside the shielding is a drain hose with a valve, which is connected to the fuel-water separator. With a suitable container under the drain hose and the engine running, drain the separator. Open the drain valve by turning it counterclockwise. Notice if any water or sludge drains out. If the fuel is clean, shut the drain valve by turning it clockwise. This didn't work, so turn off the engine and let it cool for 10 to 15 minutes. Then, check the glow plug system. Note, clean fuel can be returned to the fuel tank. Contaminated fuel must be disposed of according to shop safety procedures. The repairer lifts the seat to gain access to the battery box. Caution, the battery cables must be disconnected before disconnecting any wires to the engine wiring harness, the protective control box, or the glow plugs. Battery voltage can be extremely dangerous. Failure to do so could result in injury to personnel or damage to equipment. The repairer must disconnect the battery cables, making sure to disconnect the negative cable first. Then disconnect the positive terminal. There are 8 glow plugs. These are located directly below the injectors on the cylinder heads. 4 on the right and 4 on the left side. After the engine has cooled, remove the engine wiring harness connectors from each of the glow plugs. These are protected with an orange rubber boot over the connector and are carefully pulled straight out and off the glow plug. Use the multimeter to check resistance on each of the 8 glow plugs. Notice that the positive probe goes to the tip of the glow plug and the negative probe to the ground at the base of the plug. To be correct, the resistance must be between 1.5 and 2.5 ohms. Notice that the multimeter is set on the 200 ohm scale. Any glow plug with resistance not in that range should be replaced. The glow plugs check out okay here. For the next step in this check, we must disconnect the engine wiring harness connector from the glow plug controller. The glow plug controller is located on the right side of the engine on the intake manifold. The repairer removes the connector from the controller. The multimeter is used to check the glow plug controller. There are 4 conditions which must be met for the controller to be serviceable. First, check for continuity between pin 2 and pin 6 on the glow plug controller. There was continuity, indicated by the tone from the multimeter. The remaining checks for the glow plug controller are resistance checks. First, check the resistance between pin 2 and pin 3 using the correct ohm scale on the multimeter. The correct reading should be approximately 0.5 ohms. The resistance between pin 4 and pin 5 should be 27 ohms. The resistance between pin 1 and pin 5 should be 139 ohms. In this case, all the conditions have been met, and the glow plug controller is good. If any of the conditions were not met, the controller would be replaced. The engine wiring harness connector is on the left side of the vehicle, going into the protective control box from the engine side. The connector is a Cannon plug connector. Remove the connector from the Cannon plug. Check for continuity between terminal D in the engine wiring harness connector and the 8 glow plug connectors. The engine wiring harness must be repaired or replaced if any of the glow plug leads do not have continuity. Now check for continuity between terminal G in the engine wiring harness connector at the protective control box and lead 2A at the alternator. There is continuity. If there wasn't, the engine wiring harness would have to be repaired or replaced. Remove the multimeter lead in preparation for the next check. The next 4 checks are all continuity checks, made from the engine wiring harness connector at the protective control box to the engine wiring harness connector at the glow plug controller. First, check for continuity between terminal C at the protective control box connector to terminal 4 at the glow plug control connector. Then check for continuity between terminal B at the protective control box connector to terminal 3 at the glow plug controller connector. Also check for continuity between terminal H at the protective control box connector to terminal 1 at the glow plug controller connector. Finally, check for continuity between terminal A at the protective control box connector to terminal 6 at the glow plug controller connector. This completes the check for the glow plugs. There was no problem found in the glow plugs, the glow plug controller, or the engine wiring harness. So, reconnect the engine wiring harness at the protective control box. And at the glow plug controller. Reconnect the battery by installing the connectors onto the battery terminals, installing the positive connector first, then the negative connector. Then check the system for proper operation. It starts, but it still sounds rough. Hook up the STI-ice to check the engine fuel pump pressure. Power up the STI-ice to perform the confidence test. Next, dial 60 for vehicle identification. Then dial vehicle identification number 14. Dial test code 24 into test select. Press test and hold until the calibration code CAL appears on the readout. Then release the test button and wait for the offset value. 0.4 is the offset value within the limits of the plus or minus 4 range allowed. So, press and release the test button. Then crank the engine and watch the readout display. Is the fuel pressure above 3 pounds per square inch? In this case, the readout shows a fuel supply pressure below 3 psi. The fuel lines and hoses have already been checked, but the fuel water separator may have a clogged fuel filter. Caution. Diesel fuel is highly flammable. Do not perform this procedure near fire or sparks. Severe injury or death could result. Also cover or plug all hoses and connections immediately after disconnection to prevent spillage and contamination. Remove all plugs prior to connection. To check the fuel filter element, it must be removed from the filter housing. Loosen the 3 hose clamps. Disconnect the transducer connector and remove the bracket screw and nut. Remove the cover from the filter housing. Then remove the preformed packing and discard it. Take out the filter element and the separator. Remove the separator from the filter element and discard the filter element. Using cleaning solvent, clean and check all metallic parts of the fuel filter housing. Any damaged or contaminated parts should be replaced. Caution, cleaning solvent is flammable. Do not use it near an open flame. Use only in well-ventilated areas with a fire extinguisher nearby. Reassemble the fuel filter using a new filter element. Then replace and reconnect it. Before cranking the engine for the next step, disconnect lead 54A from the fuel starter solenoid. Caution, do not operate the starter continuously for more than 20 seconds. Doing this will result in damage to the starter. Wait 10 to 15 seconds between periods of operation. Open the drain valve from the fuel water separator to purge the system of air and any dirt which may have gotten into the system while the filter was removed. Now that the fuel filter is purged, reconnect lead 54A in order to start the vehicle. So far, you have checked the fuel lines, the air filter, the fuel water separator, the glow plugs, the fuel pump pressure, and the fuel filter. There are 2 remaining areas in troubleshooting the fuel system, the fuel injectors and the injector pump itself. First, we're going to inspect the fuel injectors. To take out an injector, the fuel hoses should be removed first. Then, using the appropriate size open-end wrench, remove the fuel line. Next, using an injector nozzle socket, remove the injector from the cylinder head. Be careful when removing the injectors to avoid damaging the nozzle. We definitely have a dirty injector here. It looks like the repairman has found the problem. Clean the injector using cleaning solvent and dry with a clean rag. After the injector has been replaced, reconnect the injector lines. Once it is reconnected, test the engine again. Sounds like a winner. The problem was corrected by cleaning the injector. However, if cleaning all injectors had failed, the final step would be to exchange the injector pump. Remember, effective troubleshooting follows correct troubleshooting procedures. Start with the simple and the least expensive repairs, working through the troubleshooting procedures to pinpoint the malfunction.